Thanks so much for tuning into the Trade Setup, viewers. Good morning, and promises to be an interesting day of trade. Simply because we probably neither here nor there, to borrow the quote of Bill Bryson's book. First, the global market snapshot. So the S&P 500 did snap the 3-day decline, which was good news per se. A gauge of Chinese shares traded in the US surged about 7%, and most people anticipate that as we head into the Christmas weekend, the trading volumes will be thin. And from a global markets perspective, in the US markets and the European markets perspective, could exacerbate the market swings. Now, did we have an exaggerated move in Europe and US? Remain difficult to say. Stocks Europe, for example, if you just look at the move that happened yesterday, it was arguably one of the best moves seen in recent times. So yesterday, I think was up about 1.4%, if I'm not wrong. But look at that uptick that we saw, right? And in a single day moving up. So I think it was pretty stellar. Let's wait and watch if that lasts. And US markets too. NASDAQ led the way, but the Dow and the S&P didn't disappoint either. So I think we had a fairly decent outing for the US markets as well. The futures are flat. And the SGX Nifty, much like the rest of the Asian peers, I would reckon, and we should get that up, is not exactly gung-ho in a really big way. Asia started off fairly cautiously, if you will. And I think we've seen that bit of, how do I say, cautious optimism when it comes to SGX Nifty as well. And this stems from the fact that one, that the futures are flat, and two, we had not the best move, but a sizable move. I mean, the mid caps and the small caps, of course, did better than the large caps. But before I get to the trade setup, let's quickly just look at what happened at the broader end of the spectrum. I think 1.3% gain for the mid caps versus a percent for the large caps. And therefore, if you look at the MOV function, you will see that the market breadth was positive, and a bunch of stocks which gained pretty strongly, which was actually the really good sign. The stocks which corrected, not as sharp a fall for them, but the stocks which did well did reasonably well for themselves, and it was across boards, across sectors. Just that real estate somehow again stands out, textiles again stand out. So the usual suspects tend to bounce back very well. So I think that's the trade setup for the day. That yes, it was a good rebound, but I think the index still ended. The Nifty still ended about 150 points off from the day's high yesterday. So there was a corrective move in both the Nifty and the Nifty Bank, which shows that the mood is not exactly gung-ho, but it's there. Now, when I was looking at technical parameters, I think 2 or 3 notes that I read, and most seem to suggest that 16,700 to the 600 to 700, 16,600, 700 band key support, whereas 17,000 an immediate hurdle. So fairly tight band, difficult to break that as per technical indicators. And when I think of sectors, when I look at the kind of trends that are happening, you probably believe that media, by virtue of what could happen in Z, it was a big day yesterday. We'll talk about that. But because of what happens in Z, media remains in focus. Real estate, by virtue of the fact that typically they tend to bounce back very, very strongly, as was the case yesterday. So it remains a very strong sector to focus on. And the road infra. Remember, viewers, in the run-up to the budget, typically infrastructure does well, but it's also the spate of award flows, right? A few days back, IRB got a very large order. Adani Enterprises yesterday backed that 17,000 crore order. So the road infrastructure orders, even PNC Infratech for the last so many months has been winning an order or two here and there. So I think that space seems to be pretty interestingly poised. So the broader end of the spectrum, these are the few names that one should watch out for, I think. FI selling was a tad lower compared to what we've been used to of late. So 1209 crores versus 1400 crores. You would argue that it's a tad lower simply because compared to the previous days. So yeah, slightly lower than previous days. Metro Brands will list today, so keep that at the back of your mind. Maybe that keeps the footwear space in focus as well. And there are a few listed names, some very small cap names, but keep them in mind. And then the stocks to watch, and watch out for Z. I wonder if there is something that comes out until 9 a.m. or 9:15 a.m. in Z Enterprises. Because if it doesn't, then it'll be interesting to see. Now, there's one journalist who put out on his Twitter apparent deal contours. I haven't seen anything thus far in the exchange, so I'll refrain from saying that. Keep in mind, very high level of positions built in already. I think in the F&O band, so I doubt you can take any fresh positions on the derivative side for Z Entertainment. But if nothing comes today, and I'm surprised really, I would reckon that it will and it should, because yesterday was the deadline, then it'll be interesting to see what the subsequent follow-up trading reaction is on Z, because as much as people have taken large positions, I'm sure a lot of them were on the BTST or STBT, depending on which side you were, mostly BTST. Most the trades were taken in that parlance. So be interesting to see what happens to the stock today if we hear nothing till about 9:15 a.m. What an hour from now. India Cements should be active. Radhakrishnan Damani has raised stake to 22.76 from 21.14%. So buys additional 2% stake, slightly over 2% stake. So that should keep this stock as well as the space maybe a bit excited. Yes Bank, the board has approved raising funds of up to 10,000 crores. Interesting announcement. So you should watch out for that. And I was talking about infrastructure names. IRB Infra, after receiving a very large order a few days back, IRB has now got executed a concession agreement with NHAI for 6 laning of the Chittoor-Thatchur highway, worth rupees 909 crores. It's not a very large number, but yeah, it adds to the 19,000 crore worth of order book for IRB Infra. So this should help. Should be interesting to see how this one does. My India, the new listing, or C Info Systems, as you would like to call it. Couple of bulk deals yesterday, wherein Fidelity Investment Trust bought about 3.18 lakh shares. Goldman Sachs India Equity Portfolio about 3.76. Not a bad listing. Maybe a tad bit lower than what a lot of people would have anticipated, but nevertheless, a decent buy. Let's wait and watch what happens there. And lastly, PAYTM, on which two initiating coverage reports, both slightly different. So Morgan Stanley, they've initiated with a overweight rating with the target price of 1875. They are saying that the TAM is large and the balance sheet risk for PAYTM is low. They believe that PAYTM is rapidly expanding into financial services at low incremental cost, which should probably help the business. And they believe that profitability should improve sharply as financial services scales up. So this is the Morgan Stanley view, the target of 1875. As I said, Goldman a bit more sanguine. They are neutral with a target price of 1630. One principal reason seems to be that they believe that the TAMs will grow at 20% CAGR over the next 5 years. So that's both a plus point and a bit of a cap, I reckon, according to Goldman, which is why this. So contrasting plays, not strictly contrasting. It's not buy and sell, buy and neutral on PAYTM, but certainly Goldman Sachs nowhere as bullish as Morgan Stanley is. And it depends on which side of the argument you were. But if you were bearish Bitcoin yesterday, then it certainly took you to the cleaners. And is this a sign of the risk on coming back for Bitcoin? So this is over the last few days, and as you can see, 21st is when the big large up move has happened. The question is, and it took Bitcoin beyond the $49,000 mark. The question is, can this sustain, or will this buckle down under pressure again? Remains to be seen. Off late, Bitcoin has met key resistances at higher levels. Let's see if this time is different. Thanks so much for tuning in, viewers. That was a short and snappy trade setup for the day today. Have a safe, profitable day ahead. If you're stepping out, please stay masked up. And for today on BloombergQuint, you'll be able to hear the management of Dixon, as well as later on in the day, the mutual fund show. Thanks so much for tuning in today.